My sermon today is titled Shaping a Puzzle Piece. How many of you tried to put a jigsaw puzzle together? Greg did. I see some more hands. Is it fun? Oh, it's a lot of fun, of course. There's always an excitement. First, you think, well, how long will it take? And if you compete, and many people do compete, and I heard that the fastest time was about an hour plus to put a 1,000-piece puzzle together. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, especially when you have not seen the image that you're trying to put together, right? So you need to figure out lots of things. So, yeah, puzzles are fun. Absolutely, no questions about that. And how long did it take for you guys to put your puzzle together? A long time or never finished. Still working on it, right? Yeah. Have you been in a situation when your puzzle is almost over, almost put together? Or maybe you have put it together and you are so excited to brag about it and show it to somebody, right? And you leave it till tomorrow, guests coming, you're going to show it to them, and then this happens. An accident, an innocent accident, like this. A cat can get into your puzzle and change your things around, and then you are so upset. When I was a university student, in the course of Russian literature, I read a story, one of old Russian fables, that explained how it happened that people have 70 major illnesses. And the story goes like this. God has created this world, created Adam, and before he made him alive, he departed somewhere for his divine business. Meanwhile, Satan came quickly, got a stick, and made 70 holes in that clay shape of a human. Messed it around and left. And when God came, he breathed his life into Adam, and since then, humanity suffers those 70 main illnesses. Satan messed around a perfect creation. So, beautiful picture. Many recognize the place. Yes, it's Lake Kolchak near Wenatchee. Near Leavenworth. Beautiful picture I took a couple of years ago. And this verse goes along very well. God saw everything he had made. It was supremely good. All right? But then we know what happened. Satan came around and messed it up. And now this. Not this. It's not something that God has to put together again to recreate, to restore His world. It's not just broken pieces, it's just a pattern that God has to recreate. And every single piece there, He needs to make again. Whatever it takes, every single piece of that jigsaw puzzle represents maybe you or me. And we are just small pieces in huge, huge jigsaw puzzle that God has. And He needs not only to shape every single piece, but to also paint it, to make it perfect and put it in place where we belong. And this masterpiece will be soon restored. But till then, God has to work on those pieces, on you and me. And there are lots of pieces, and they're all unique. This is a very basic pattern. But those shapes can be crazy. But it doesn't matter how complex they are for Him, He is able to make that perfect piece, to shape it the way He wants. So when He puts it, it goes in perfectly. No gaps, no imperfections, in perfect harmony. How about this puzzle? How many curves does each puzzle have? A lot. A lot of work to create every single one. And it's not just caring about one piece to make it perfect. That piece somehow needs to perfectly align with another one. Is that hard now? And that one has many sides that share their border with others, right? It's so hard. Now imagine that every curve you see there is an event in your life. An event in your life, part of your life. And God having a plan how you should be shaped creates everything that will help you to be in that shape. And what is your response to God's effort to shape you the way you need to be? Do we always go along with God, with His plans? Or sometimes we fight back, we struggle. We want things to be our way. We want to look our way, not the way God intended us to look or to be. So, this reminds me a situation when Joseph, after going through so many troubles, when he was betrayed by his brothers, almost killed, sold to slavery, was in prison, then at the end became the prime minister of Egypt. And at the end, when his brothers came, he was able to say this: "But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save you, your lives, by great deliverance." God had a plan. And Joseph worked with God. So what God planned was accomplished, was achieved. So God has a plan for every one of us. How about this verse, the story of Esther? It's a well-known story, right? She became a queen. And her uncle, Mordecai, came to her and said, who knows, maybe it was for a moment like this that you came to be a part of the royal family, so she could be able to save her people from being pretty much wiped out by the enemy. For such a time like this, she was placed into the palace. And trust me, for each and every one of us, there is a time when we need to respond in a way that God expects us to respond. And sometimes we fight, we struggle, we don't want to go alone with God. So today I will share my story, my experience, how God led me in my life to place me or prepare me for a moment like this. Many of you know that before moving to America, I worked at the publishing house. I was the head of the editorial department. And that position required a lot of knowledge, a lot of education, and expertise in many areas. Well, for once, you need to know Russian language very well, so you can edit books, edit articles, write articles. On top of that, you need to know English very well, because you communicate with people, with leadership. And back then, we didn't have Russian-speaking authors. 99% of our books and magazines, they were translated. And you need to know the language really well so you can be sure that what you publish is accurate. You need to have leadership skills to manage your editorial department. Because if you miss the deadline, there is a production department. There's lots of equipment there waiting for you to deliver that manuscript to production so they can print it. One mismanaged project can be a disaster. So, God has started to work on shaping me to fit for that position at that time, long time ago. Back at school, Soviet time in the 70s, you know, Adventists didn't go to school after the 8th grade, normally. The reason being that it was pointless. The teachers would not give you any good grades anyway. It doesn't matter how good you try. You'll get a C at the best. And they will despise you in many ways. They'll shame you publicly in all possible ways. So you want to leave the school as soon as possible. So to graduate from 8th grade was like maximum people would do. And then they would go to the evening program school and they would just work. And that was my kind of plan also, just to follow footsteps of my brothers and many other brothers and sisters in the church. So, what would I do after the 8th grade? I loved photography. I loved that magic of developing film and getting those negatives and then prints and stuff. So I wanted to be a photographer. And why do you want to be a photographer? There were special technical schools, special courses, where they will train you, and then you go and work. So I went to one school, having some connections. They made some calls, said this person will come, please find a room for him there. So I went there that summer, and turned out that they accept students only when they're 16. And I was just barely 15. So I couldn't get into the school. So, and at that time, my brother Ivan comes from city of Petrogorsk, and he said, we have a great college that teaches how to be a foreign language teacher. Of course, you don't want to be a teacher, ironically, he said, but at least if you study here, you will learn English so you can use it for church, maybe translate books or whatnot. And I said, okay, why not? I went to high school. It was a 2-year program back then. They were so happy to see me at church, at school, but at that time there was one thing. See, our father was not a Christian before. Well, he was a believer, but not practicing Christian. And back in Soviet time, it was a 6-day school program, and Sabbath was a school day, and we went to school on Sabbath. But when I went to high school, I decided, okay, no more. I am old enough now to stand for my beliefs. I'm not going to go to school on Saturdays. And I expected a lot of trouble, but there was none. No one said a thing to me about Sabbath keeping, because for them it was like a trade-off to tolerate that he doesn't come to school on Saturdays or not to have him at all at school. For them it was a big progress. They believed the Christians that were not allowed to study after the 8th grade. For them it was a big step forward, so they left me alone. Anyhow, at the end of the school, finals. One of the finals was on Sabbath. So what do? If you miss a test, you failed. But that photography hobby that I had, played a role. A principal came to me before the finals, and he said, I attended this important meeting and I brought some pictures. Could you please develop and print for me those pictures? And I did. And when I handed the prints to him, he said, I will try to work with the district administration about your exam time. And a week later, a new schedule, and now exam is scheduled for another day, not on Saturday. So that little hobby helped me to advance. Now moving forward, going to college. Thousands of people trying to get in. Thousands trying to be freshmen. And in the English department, there were over 1,000 people trying to get in. For each available seat, there were like 5 people trying to get accepted. And you pass your exams to enter. 4 exams to enter. 2 of them were scheduled for Sabbath. I'll skip how I handle rescheduling for myself. It's a long story. But the truth is that I was able to pass the test on different days, was accepted into an evening program, the reason being this. When you pass your entrance tests, you're supposed to get this many points minimum, 23 points of 25 possible. And then you would be accepted. I was half a point short. And they said, okay, with this great success, but since you're just half point short, we will accept you into the evening program. So you can work during the day, study in the evening. I was happy to take that, all right? So I went back home, packed my things, returned to school when school was supposed to start. And at the dean's office, the secretary says, the dean for English department wants to see you. I went in, and he says, we decided to accept you to a day program, full program. And I was in awe and shock. The reason why I was in shock, because back then, bribery was the main thing to move anything. People, parents, would bribe the administration so they would accept their kids, and they would pay a price equivalent to the price of a car, okay? So they would get better points, better grades. And here I am, not offering anyone anything, and they said, we have accepted you to a day program. I could not understand why. I understand now, but back then I had no clue why this was happening. So another thing that is also remarkable, speaking of how God shapes and plans and prepares for the future, see, I studied German at school, at high school. And now I'm enrolling into English department. And you're supposed to pass your entrance test in the language that you're supposed to study. Doesn't work. But there was some exclusion. If you are from a small town in a rural place, there were 2 groups designed specifically for those kids, and they can study English without studying it previously. And I was from a small town. And I was right there, accepted. So school started. First Sabbath. What I'm doing? What am I doing? I go to church on Monday. What do you do on Monday? You go to school? Yes, you go to school, but not to the classroom. You go to the head of the department and explain why you missed that school day. Get a pink slip or whatever, and then with that slip, they'll allow you to the classroom. So what do I tell them? If I tell them, well, I am a Christian, I do not attend school on Saturdays, after the first Sabbath, right? What would they do? Before it's too late, they'll give me a boot. So I made something up. Another Sabbath, I made something up on Monday to excuse, right? It's been 1 month, 2nd month, I ran out of excuses. They get suspicious. And it was time to tell that I was an Adventist. And the reason why I missed those days because I worship God on Sabbath. I expected the worst. See, by law, they could not expel me for being a Christian. So they started to create circumstances to trap me so I would fail. And they have rescheduled classes that would meet once a week. All of a sudden, all of them started to happen only on Saturday. So I could not attend a single class. And of course, I was struggling with that. But when the finals came, semester finals, I went to this test. And the teacher, examiner, looks at me. Who are you? I've never seen you in my class. Well, let's see what you know. And back then, they would kind of interrogate you. You draw a card randomly that would have 2 questions to answer of many that you study for. So the questions I had, they were easy for me. So I answered one. He shakes his hand. You totally missed the point. You're telling me something strange. Okay, another question. Same story. You don't know the subject. What are you doing here? Let me show you notes. We were required to take notes of Karl Marx, Lenin. It was History of Communist Party class. So I had notes, good notes. In fact, some I copied from my classmates at the time when I was not there. So and he is like browsing, oh, so weak, so bad, not enough. Failed. It was enough for my friend that I copied from, but not enough for me. So next attempt to pass that test was after the break. We had like a 2-week break. I came to pass a test. Now it's a different teacher, but same story. Again, I didn't get the point. I don't know what I'm talking about. They failed me the second time. And you had 3 shots altogether. The last attempt, guess what? Wild guess. Think of schedule. The last attempt, they scheduled on Sabbath. So here I am forced to decide to go to pass a test, but fail my beliefs, or fail the test and leave school. So next Monday, I didn't want to even get up from bed. I slept in, went to school 2 hours later. Instead of going to the classroom, I went directly to the announcement board, and there it was. Paper from the principal for systematic, as they formulated, systematic absences and failed test. This person needs to be expelled from school. So I went to the administration, picked up my papers, and left. And guess what? I had a full semester of English. Remember, I studied German at school. I didn't have a clue how to read English. Especially when I studied German, it's so hard to switch to English. But those few months of first semester gave me enough knowledge so I could study by myself using a textbook. The next stage in my life was the Soviet Army. I was 18. The time came to go to serve in the army. Usually they draft you April through May, sometimes late in June, but rare. And I'm waiting for the paper to come, telling me to go to this place, to military place, where they will send you to serve in the military. And I'm waiting, there is nothing coming, like they don't need me. All of a sudden, mid-June, I received that paper. June 30th, you come here to be a soldier. Turns out that the military department somehow was not notified that I was no longer a student. And at that time, they drafted students after they passed their finals. So I was drafted with them, end of June, and all students, since students are educated, right? We were sent to a military school for 6 months of training to become commanders, sergeants. So there was, I'm not going to talk about my military experience, my first 6 months there. But the point is, They were training me to be a leader, a commander of a platoon. All right? Remember how I told you in the beginning that some of the qualifications for being head of the editorial department is leadership, knowing how to deal with people, how to run the team, how to keep everything in check and in order. And there I was in military school, getting training that would be necessary for me in the future. Did I want it? Of course not. In fact, I was threatened so many times by my officers, giving me the very last warning: if another Sabbath you will not obey your commander, you're going to a military jail. Or they would say, we will send you somewhere else where you'll be just a private and you will carry a heavy machine gun, or we'll send you to a construction battalion and you will work there with heavy tools. I said, fine, I'm happy to be there, but not here. I don't need this. But they kept me there. I graduated and I was sent to another place to serve my other year and a half time there. God was working on the future for me. Even in this, God was teaching me. God was training me. God was shaping me so I would be a good fit at the right moment. So after the army, I got enrolled to another university, and this time by correspondence, because I kind of learned my lesson. Daytime school doesn't work for me if you're an Adventist, right? But I had enough knowledge of English now to pass the entrance exam, because they didn't have that special allowance. You must pass test in English to enroll. And I passed it, no issues. And then many things changed in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union eventually collapsed. But at that time, I was already enrolled into the Zauksky Theological Seminary. Interesting that I was pretty much taking tests. My final test, it was fourth level, fourth year of university studies. And I'm there for a month, full day classes and tests. And I'm there and I receive a telegram, no cell phones back then. A telegram was delivered to my hotel. And it read, my brother sent it to me. I got a call from the conference office. They want you to go study in Zauksky for free. Full scholarship, pocket expenses, everything covered. They selected 3 guys from our conference to go study so we would be pastors or first students there when the seminary was opened in 1989. But you need to come to Zauksky, pass tests, entrance tests, while I'm still passing tests here at university. So I had to quickly reschedule a few things. Fly to Moscow, pass entrance tests to the seminary, was accepted, returned, finished my session, my tests, and then went to study in Zauksky. So for 2 years, it was back and forth between 2 schools, studying two schools at once. And at that time, something else happened that was God's providence, and that was God shaping another curve in my puzzle. I came home for a Christmas break, and there was a debate at church on the topic of divine nature of Jesus. Specifically, who died on the cross? God or human? There was a debate between different members. And my brother, who was the pastor at that time, he leaned one way. Others were against him. And I was there, and I presented the theme, presented the subject on divinity of Christ, and explained how I was taught at seminary, and I had some books in English with me so I could research and present, and that helped. But at that moment, people were telling, if we could only have Ellen White's books. She writes about this in the book Desire of Ages, but no one had it at the church, except retired pastor who was not around at that time. No one had the book. It was impossible to find them typed on a typewriter. So I returned to school, and a few months later, the school decided to send students for 3 months to start Bible studies and start to plant churches as our practice. They sent me to one place not too far from Moscow. I went there as I agreed to meet somebody local to help me to navigate through many things. I went there, that person was not there. Why? I went there to start planting, right? And that person didn't show up. I returned to school and reported what happened, and they said, don't worry, we have a new assignment for you. See, the publishing house is about to start its work. And the first book that we are going to publish would be The Desire of Ages. It's that book that we needed back in the church where we had argument, right? And he said, since you know English, and now you know theology, you will restore old translation of this book so it reads nice without any errors, grammatical or theological or whatnot. You're going to prepare this for printing. And everyone is there planting churches, and I'm sitting all day long reading one line in English, another line in Russian, and compare whether it's correct, sounds good, and everything. And I kind of fell in love with that work. But before, a few months before, the chief editor at that time, he was just a teacher with assignment to work for editorial department also. He met me and said, I want you to work for the publishing house. I said, no way. I don't like office job. I'm never going to be working for the publishing house. But they gave me this time, practice time. This is my just assignment. And I did it, and I loved it. And I started to work for the publishing house. And a year later, that teacher that also worked as a head of the editorial department decided not to run the department anymore, returned back to teaching only. They were looking for a head of the department. Qualifications, as I mentioned, to know Russian very well, to know English, have theological background, have leadership skills, and so forth. And they looked around everywhere, and there I was. Very young at that time, and they put me in charge. Usually they would put someone with 20 years of pastoral experience to work with books. But now I'm there, and I was there for 10 years leading the department. Did I mention photography? When you run a editorial department, you need lots of pictures. You need illustrations. And there was a time when we decided to start a magazine. We needed lots of pictures. And I was kind of trained a photographer already. I had the skills. So I built a studio there, and we had our own studio to produce magazines, pictures for magazines. So this is very short story. I mean, there is a lot of details to share that are so amazing. Now, when I look back, I definitely understand that every curve I made at that time, God had that pre-planned for me. And if I resisted, He would find a way around and make me do things that He wanted to do. He has His master plan, called Plan of Salvation. And each one of us has a role in that plan. So, now, question for you. That perfect picture is coming back together, right? But few pieces are missing. Are you a missing piece? Think of that picture as of this congregation. See, to have a clear, complete, beautiful picture of this congregation, we need to have all pieces present. Maybe you enjoy your time sitting at home on a couch and watching the stream, and that's nice too. But when I look into this audience, I see those holes. I see those missing pieces. Ask yourself, are you one? And if you are, maybe it's time to start thinking that you are needed here. Because your missing spot there becomes an excuse for another piece to become missing. I think you get the point, right? Another question I have, what shape are you? Are you the right shape to fit into that spot that God designed for you? Or you're still struggling with God? He wants you to be of this shape because He knows your capabilities. He knows how you can serve Him and this church best. But you would say, no, I'm going to stretch this way or shrink this way. But guess what happens when you change your shape? And you kind of in place, in your place, but you change your shape. What happens? There is a gap. Small gap, a big gap. It depends, right? But guess what? No gaps allowed. The gap that you create, guys, whether you're watching online or here, come occasionally, the gap that you create needs to be filled. And it is filled. By who? By the neighboring piece. That neighboring piece needs to stretch thinner, stretch wider to cover the gap. All right? We have lots of pieces that need to be present to run the cameras, run computers, to grade, to sing, lots of things. Now, do we want our congregation to be a picture-perfect congregation, or somewhat with holes of our own creation? I'll leave you there in your answer to yourself and to God. Amen.